Thank you so much for joining me for this amazing interview. It has been such a pleasure talking with you. Please tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and what you do. If you've ever done a podcast interview, this is probably about the time in the interview when your mind goes absolutely blank. Those nerves that burned off after your first few minutes of conversation all come rushing back. Your mouth goes dry. You feel like the clock is ticking right in front of you, and the Oscars music is going to start playing any minute to get you the heck off the stage. And as your life flashes before your eyes, you open your mouth to answer that host's final question to you. And 9 times out of 10, you say one of two things. You either say, head to my website or follow me on social media. The interview ends, you log off, you let out a huge sigh of relief. The episode is released and you wait to see some kind of ROI from that interview. You keep your eyes on your DMs, on your emails, on your website intake form, and nobody's reaching out. And you're totally confused because it was such a phenomenal interview. You gave so much value. You dropped so much major wisdom. So why aren't people jumping onto your email list or sending you inquiries or booking sales calls or joining your membership or buying your products? Before I help you shine a light on what went wrong that is resulting in crickets from that podcast audience, I want you to know one thing. And that one thing is that everybody does this. You are not alone. Now is not the time to start beating yourself up about past interviews that maybe could have gone differently. What you'll learn today will help you make changes to your approach going forward. And that's amazing because when we know better, we can do better. So please don't be mean to yourself about all those times the host said, where can we learn more about you? And you said, visit my website or follow me on social. You didn't know any better. The truth is, and so few people understand this, that those last 30 seconds of your interview are going to make or break whether or not you see a return on your investments of time and energy that you gave during that podcast interview, and whether or not you ever hear from that audience again. Because the last 30 seconds are your opportunity to share an effective call to action that brings those listeners into your world forever. And yes, visit my website and follow me on social are both valid calls to action, but they're not optimal calls to action for a podcast listener, and I'm going to explain why. So I want you to actually close your eyes for a minute and think about what a podcast listening experience looks like for you and for your partner and for your friends and family. When you see someone listening to a podcast or think about someone listening to a podcast, what are they doing, right? Most people are not listening to a podcast while holding their phone, staring at the screen with their thumbs at the ready to click a link or a button. Most people are listening to podcasts while they're multitasking, while they are driving or grocery shopping or walking the dog or working out. This is amazing because it means they're probably pretty focused on what they're listening to because the only thing happening in their ears is you with no distractions. But if they're not looking directly at their phones, a call to action like follow me on social is not going to be the most effective way to continue building your relationship with that audience. So let's talk about 3 things that an effective podcast interview call to action needs to do and be so that you can bring those listeners into your world and help them even more through your own content and your own paid offerings if you have them. I'm also going to give you one bonus tip that is guaranteed to increase the rate at which your audience takes a next step with you. So the first thing your call to action should be is logical. Simple, right? Your call to action should be the step in between the conversation you just had during that interview and the ultimate destination that you would love for those listeners to end up. So your call to action should be a logical next step for a listener. What I see a lot of people do on podcast interviews is to offer a call to action that's not actually a step forward. Sometimes it's actually a step backwards or a step sideways. So for example, if you are a dietitian and you offer your listeners a checklist for grocery shopping that's going to help them shop for optimal energy, buy food and buy ingredients to help them achieve optimal energy, but you already covered that and then some during your podcast interview, they're not going to want to take you up on that free offer because you already revealed everything from that resource in the episode. They're going to be thinking, she already told me everything I could ever possibly need to know. Why would I need that checklist? Or Maybe you just spent the entire podcast interview talking about how to win with Pinterest as a small business, but the call to action you have prepared is a 5-step success plan for YouTube. That's not a logical next step. It's more like a side step because you're talking about a totally different platform. So I'd really love for you to think about, what is the content of our conversation in this interview going to be? And then what's the next logical step that I can offer to someone who loved everything that they heard and everything that they learned during that interview and now wants even more? The next thing a podcast interview CTA should be is irresistible. Okay. So if you think about someone who's driving while they're listening to a podcast interview, what is going to happen when your episode ends and they're on the highway going 70 miles an hour? They're going to keep on driving at 70 miles an hour, and Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever they're listening is going to start playing another episode. There's no point at which Apple Podcast stops and says, "Hey, Kelly, I see you're driving at 70 miles an hour. Would you like to pause and take the call to action that you were just invited to take on this episode? Or would you like to keep driving?" Right? That doesn't happen. The episode stops playing, a new one starts playing. So when you're thinking about crafting a call to action, I want you to think, what could I offer someone at the end of an interview that would make someone actually consider pulling over if they're driving so that they could take that action step that I'm inviting them to take? You've got to imagine this person asking themselves, what's in it for me if I take this call to action? And genuinely ask yourself, what could I offer to someone that would be so valuable that they would actually consider pulling over even if they're on the highway driving? If someone says, follow me on Instagram, I don't know about you, but that's not enough to make me want to pull over and take an action. But if someone were to say, click below here in the show notes to unlock a free 7-day one-on-one mastermind experience with me in Puerto Rico, where I'm going to help you make 6 figures in 7 days. That is something that I would seriously consider pulling over for, wouldn't you? Now, of course, that's not a realistic example because you can't offer that at scale. But those are the lines I want you to be thinking along. What is the juiciest, most exciting, most irresistible thing I could offer that would make someone seriously consider pulling over to make sure that they could take action right away? And if you don't offer paid products or services, and instead you would just love to bring people to listen to your podcast, help them understand what specific value they're going to receive by going to check out your podcast, to a specific episode. Send them to a specific destination. Help them understand, okay, if you loved this conversation about XYZ, you're going to love podcast episode 132 about 123. Send them somewhere specific and help them understand exactly what they're going to receive in terms of value, in terms of transformation, what they're going to learn, what they're going to master if they take that action that you are inviting them into. The third thing a great call to action that is optimized for the podcast listening experience should be is memorable. Memorable. Remember, your listeners are doing other things. You want whatever call to action you offer them to be something that they can at least remember to come back to if they can't take that action right away. You can offer your audience a keyword that's something simple that they can remember. Maybe it's something clever or funny, a memorable word from maybe an anecdote that you shared during that episode that they can DM you to redeem whatever call to action you're offering them. So if you told a story during the interview about how you realized your calling in life while you were eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal, maybe your call to action is to message you the word cereal on any of your social platforms to redeem a super high value next step. When you offer your call to action, you can also share a vulnerable personal story because vulnerability is always so memorable. So to recap, in order to create ROI from a podcast interview, what you say in those last 30 seconds really matters. And unless the host explicitly asks you, Kelly, where can we follow you on social media? Or please tell us your exact website URL, I want you to try to do more with that opportunity. So give people a logical next step so they can come find you and receive even more value from you. And make sure that you offer them something that's good enough they would actually consider pulling over to take that action right away. If you want to see ROI from an interview, that call to action should pass the pullover test with flying colors. And because so few people are actually looking at their phones with their thumbs at the ready to take an action or click a link, please, please, please be sure to make that CTA memorable so that it lives rent-free in their minds long after the episode is over. And if they can't actually take that action right away, they'll at least remember to come back to it when they're done with the school drop off or their workout or whatever it is they're doing while they're listening to you. So the next time you're prepping for a podcast interview, sit down in advance and think about your call to action and make sure that it is a logical next step, that it is totally irresistible, and that it is highly, highly memorable. And I've got one bonus tip for you that's going to make a huge difference between the ROI you're seeing right now and the ROI potential of your podcast interviews. And this tip is so simple. Are you ready? I want you to repeat your full name as you're signing off the interview. If it's a 30 or 60-minute interview and your listener is walking the dog or cleaning the house, they have long forgotten your name by the end of the interview. Think about how often you listen to a podcast and you love the guest, but by the time the episode is over, you've maybe at most caught their first name. Leave the audience with your full name. And this can sound as simple as, "Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to have been a guest. If you would like to take the next step on your health journey, I've got a free bundle for you that'll help you expand on everything we've talked about today and go even further by helping you do X, Y, and Z." And to grab that bundle, all you need to do is click the link in the show notes below or send me a message on any social platform. Just send me a message with the word cereal and I'll send it right over. Again, my name is Kelly Moser. That's actually my name, but I'm not a dietitian. Again, my name is Kelly Moser. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to connect with you further. So there you have it, my friends. Get out there with these tips and watch the magic of a potent call to action at work.